All right. Welcome to the August edition of the Tempo Community Call, the Turkey edition, somehow not November. Today we have a pretty thin agenda, and I promised an AMA, and I feel like a million people showed up, so here we go. We're going to enjoy this. We'll start with some quick news. I'll start with some team member news, although the most impacted team members out here. Ananya, who has been with the project since the beginning, is moving on. He's going to go to college. He's going back for a master's degree. So he's going to take us a break. He will remain a maintainer. He's done amazing work on the project, and I think he'll probably stay involved in some ways, but his focus will no longer be Tempo in life. And we all wish him well. So if you want to drop him a line in Slack or tweet at him or whatever, I think you'd appreciate it. He's been a huge part of this project, and he'll still be involved, but I think his contributions will come down a bit. And I really wish he were here. I guess he can watch the recording too. In other news, we also, and Jenny's not here either, we recently added a new developer, Jenny, in the past couple of weeks, Jenny Lamb, and she's been a great addition. She's just getting started, and Siraj as well. So we have some new additions to the team, neither who could show up, but they can watch the recording too, I guess. So there you go. That's it for team member news. A little bit of change up there, but I think we're gonna keep moving forward, of course, and we have a strong team, and I'm excited to see what happens next. Tempo 1.5 has been cut, kind of. Two release candidates have been made, one today and one last week. I think there might be one more commit that we want to sneak in, but it's for the most part ready to go. I'll link you to RC0. It has the bigger change log. The big headline feature here is Parquet as a experimental backend. We are running it right now in our operational cluster. It's about, I just looked, it was actually larger than I realized. It's over 300 megs, like 350 megs a second, and around 2 million spans a second. So we're running that now. We are having some just small issues, small stability issues, but we're kind of trying to tighten up the ship. The biggest problem really is that compaction just takes way longer with the Parquet blocks, and we're going to continue to work on that as we go forward. But at our scale, we are definitely seeing just less, or the performance of the compactors reduced quite a bit, and we had to scale our compactors up. So that's the major kind of like caveat if you want to run Parquet backend, is watch your compactors, and you might need to scale those up. We also are aware of a panic that only happens in a single binary, but we'll definitely look to fixing that up before 2.0. So we've never seen it in our distributed system with the various components, but it's fairly easy to reproduce with a single binary just by spinning up the Docker Compose. And there's a helpful member of the community who has posted an issue on that in a lot of details. So it's something to do with Parquet. It does a lot of unsafe pointer handling for performance, and maybe they juggled a pointer poorly. There appears to be some kind of a pointer issue there, but we'll file an issue upstream. We'll get some good examples for them, and we'll try to get that ironed out certainly before 2.0. Other than that, I was going to add this. Thank you for whoever typed this in. The other, I'd say, major feature is that the metrics generator now supports messaging systems and databases. So if you have a Kafka or RabbitMQ kind of situation, a queuing thing, or you're using any kind of database, the metrics generator code now looks for basically all of the OpenTelemetry standard semantic tagging. And if it sees those, then it'll create additional spans and decorate those with information, and you can get your databases and your queues on your service graph now, which is cool. The final thing is usage stats. So we did add usage stats, which is similar in implementation to Loki. There will be in the blog post details about what's shared with Grafana. It's all, of course, anonymous. It's just details about configuration to help us know what people are using, and to help us, target our efforts in terms of improving the product, essentially. But the blog post will detail what's sent, and it'll also detail how to disable it. It's a simple config setting to disable, so all of the information will be there. And that's 1.5 in a nutshell. There's of course a bunch of features and additional stuff, as well as some small breaking changes, nothing major, and some bug fixes. It's a pretty standard release. Parquet, I would say, being the highlight here if people want to experiment with that. Cool. So I have a turkey hat on, and it's time to do an AMA. If anyone would, yeah, feel free to ask anything you want. You can unmute, or you can just drop it in chat here, or even put it in the doc. And the team, this is not me AMA, I guess. If you do ask a question about me, I'll maybe answer it. But it's more like a tempo team AMA. But if you want to ask what my favorite pizza is or something, I'll let you know. I'm going to ask a question. Joe, what's your favorite pizza? Man, like, I like a lot of pizza. I'm I'm a veggie guy, really. So I like the olives. Green olives and black olives are my favorite. Peppers too, get those on there. Banana peppers are delicious. So I'd say a good veggie pizza with a lot of options. That's probably my favorite pizza.
With a sprinkle of turkey?
No turkey. No, look at this guy. You wouldn't do that to him, would you? Come on now. He's just hanging out.
What's your best turkey impression?
That is a question I won't answer. I feel that's a little too personal, and I don't think we can really do that in a public forum. And never mind. I'm not going to say the word. I'm not going to do it. All right. Nothing else? No tempo questions? No parquet questions? Sure, Gabriel, what's up, man?
Hey, I haven't been here in a few, but I'm back. I'm back with the performance scaling questions, I guess. So since the last time I was here, we had the pretty significant total traffic increase, I would say. We're doing about 250 million SPM in a single tenant per cluster right now. So the ingest path is mostly fine. That's been scaling up pretty good. I think what we notice is the query times are becoming increasingly long because of increasing block list size. So we've been kind of just increasing max block size progressively just to make bigger and bigger and bigger blocks to help with block size. But I don't know if there's like guidelines on how to tweak query performance. There's stuff that we kind of like stumbled upon a little bit. Like we run a like 100 gigabyte memcache instance, and that helps for cache hits. But like there's an upper limit to that a little bit. We would like run more queryers, like way more, but we're still seeing. We'd like it to be even faster, I guess. The trace lookups. So I don't know if there's any general advice.
You can increase your query shards. Oh,
we've been doing that as well. Yeah.
Okay. I'll also point to this PR that came in. Ooh, you got to tell me how many bytes per second you're doing too. But this PR was when was this? I think it was even in the previous release, 1.4. But this means, with this PR, Tempo will take start end parameters on trace ID search and only search the blocks that are within those ranges. What that means is you could get a partial return. So like if you had a 48-hour trace and you specified a smaller, something inside of that, it would only find the spans that, inside the time range specified. But, let's say you're a normal user and your traces are normally a second or two, and you be super generous and specify 24 hours, you're still going to massively reduce the percentage of the block list that you have to search.
I know in the past we mentioned that we had like super long running traces. We mostly got rid of those. That's not a problem anymore. We replaced with links between traces in like we can exclude those from the it's like we have short traces now, a few seconds, and that's like the
Cool. Now Grafana does not support this yet, although I think there was somebody who opened a PR and it kind of died. I wish we had Joey or maybe Connor on to comment. But let's see if I can at least find the PR. Because they seemed, here we go. Here's the PR. It's still unmerged, but I'll put it in the community call doc here. Oops. Did I do that? I didn't do that. Yeah, so there's a PR for Grafana. Did I erase the other link somehow? I may have done that. But anyways, this is somebody who was attempting. It's actually the same person who added the parameter on our end and just kind of died. But I know the team has expressed interest in this. Like there was some back and forth chatter, and then the developer just kind of disappeared, I guess. So extending temp or Grafana to use this. I think the only ask they had was, can we make it configurable? Because they had already put the parameter in. They just wanted there to be a little configuration option. So it was disabled by default. And you say like, do an hour outside of the range or whatever, 2 hours or something, like a configurable option there. So if someone sees that PR through, or if you just kind of jump in and push it and ask, for if there's interest or whatever, I think you could probably get some momentum on that. And then you would really be able to chop down the percentage of the block list you are searching for trace IDs.
Okay. Yeah, that would be, that's something I can take a look at. I was also wondering, like, if there's an obvious performance hit on having really large blocks. Like, let's say my blocks are 50 gigs on average size.
Let's just say.
But they're not. I'm just wondering if I can, how much I can stretch it, I think average block is like 10, 15 gigs right now.
Really? Ours go up to 20, I think. I'm surprised yours are that small. How big do our blocks get?
We have a lot of really small traces,
Okay.
I would say.
Okay.
Basically, we have the biggest volume producer has a special instrumentation that collapses all the spans together, except for really small percentage. So we have a lot of like, 2-3 span traces. So I think that helps in the block size.
I don't think there really is an upper bound. I mean, at some point you're just kind of like, your compactor spends a long time taking 8 blocks and creating 1 block, where it would have, could have done a whole lot of smaller blocks to reduce your block list. So it's kind of an opportunity cost, I suppose, to making bigger and bigger blocks. But if that's just kind of necessary in order to, if that's just kind of necessary in order to make your block list short enough, that's fine. The other thing is, I think there's an upper limit on the total size that'll devote to the bloom filters. Is that true? It's been a while since I've looked at that code. If that's true, then at some point your bloom filter false positive rate will go up and you'll be checking more blocks than you have to. And with that many traces at that small of a size, you may be running into that. I'd have to go look at that code again.
The bloom filters target 100 kilobytes per shard in the number of shards for the bloom filter recorded in the meta. So I feel like that could scale up really large.
Yeah, I thought I remember there being a max there, but I don't remember off the top of my head.
Okay. I'll take a look. Is there a metric for false positive rates?
No, but if you just kind of check some of your, it's in the meta JSON? Is it? No, I don't think it is. Damn, no, I don't think it is. Sorry, darn. I don't think it is. Let me look into that. I don't think there's a good way to know what the false positive rate is of the blocks that are being created. You could do like a real basic bloom filter estimate, just like total size dedicated to the bloom filters, using that as well as the total IDs. Total number of objects is going to give you a rough estimate of the false positive.
Okay.
Let me. I'll make a note to find some of that detail for you. Could you share your bytes per second? I'd love to hear what that is at 215 million spans per second.
I don't think I have it on a graph right out of the gate. I think I have it in a place where it's not going to be representative of only tempo, unfortunately.
Okay, no worries. I might bug you for that in Slack when I find this false positive stuff for you.
Okay, I'll just put a note to add it So I have it handy.
Cool.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. Very
Yeah,
helpful.
thank you. Sure. What's up, Fausto?
Hey, yes. So, yeah, I have a question because some time ago I saw a PR in the Tempo Helm. It was about adding the autoscaler for all the components. And I saw that you added a comment there saying, hey, I actually don't recommend it to add it right now, the autoscaler to the ingesters. So I wonder then how do you do it at Grafana? How do you provision your ingesters if it's not without autoscaler, or if there is a technique maybe we can do? And also another question after this one is it better to have like a bunch of smaller ingesters or like a very beefy ingesters?
Sure. I'd like to hear what other members think on this. I would say, so yeah, we don't auto scale. First of all, we don't auto scale ingesters. They're statically provisioned. The cost is just like a manual process to downscale right now is the problem. You could maybe put some upward automatic scaling, but I would never put down automatic scaling. You have to kind of hit a flush endpoint, and then it'll remove itself from the ring, flush all the data. There's a kind of a manual thing there. So distributors and queryers, compactors, those can all be auto-scaled via CPU or requests or any kind of normal thing you might want to scale by. But ingesters are stateful and cannot really be downscaled without some kind of manual process right now. We really should remove that from the Helm chart. Not the auto-scaling in general is fine, but that one piece needs to have it removed. And then in terms of, I need to drop it. I appreciate you. Of course, you earned it, Richie. It's on for the whole time, man. In terms of the ingesters, I would say more smaller ingesters. I mean, there's some lower bound there, but your blast radius gets smaller and smaller the more you have, I would say. What do you think, Marty?
Yeah, see, I was thinking the other way. Fewer, beefier ingesters would let you create larger blocks from the get-go. There's a lot less work for the compactor to have to come back and clean up, right? I mean, yeah, there's a lower bound. Like you have to think about blast radius and stuff like that. But yeah, it also accommodates larger traces better, I think. You'd have more memory to work with. Like if you have traces that are trickling in and you can build them up and flush them like a little bit more like co-located the data. So I think it's easier downstream. Yeah, I guess it depends on how you define like small or beefy too.
And how do you define it? What is a small figure?
I guess beefy is something like 15 or 20 gigs of memory.
Yeah.
Maybe like 10-ish, at least 10.
On the old stuff for sure. On Parquet, it uses a lot more memory.
Yeah.
I think our ingesters take, after replication factor, so this is ×3 our ingest. I think our ingesters take about 30 megs a second each, would be my guess. I think maybe if we measured that by like ingestion, that might be a good way to provide guidelines. But I think, right, we receive, like I said, 300 something meg a second. We have about 30 ingesters. Well, we had roughly the same number of ingesters as we had hundreds of tens of megabytes per second, I guess, and then ×3, so 30. Ooh, Ryan, curious from this group. Oh, have you ever run across this or request to visualize traces as flame graphs?
Yo,
Hey,
yeah,
Ryan.
I was just curious. I didn't, it was not something that I would have myself thought of, but it was a issue in the Jaeger repo, and there's actually like a couple of different ones that people asked this on separate occasions, and so apparently some people found it useful. I was curious. I felt like both being tracing people and Grafana people, that this would be a good group to ask. And I mean, fine if the answer is no. I'm just kind of genuinely curious.
That'd be kind of interesting, right? Would you lose anything from a flame graph?
I think you kind of lose the sort of sequential aspect of it, I guess. You kind of get more of a aggregate. I mean, it seems like the typical situation where someone would request it is when there's like a ton of spans like that are really small that are like all on top of each other that make it, I guess, like super long vertically or something.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know personally. I guess that's kind of is kind of what I'm gathering, I guess.
Yeah, if everything was synchronous, I think a flame graph would work real well. I think the problem is when you have concurrency, right? Because then you'd have, how would you represent like multiple stacks? If you had some kind of like depth to your flame graph, maybe that'd be kind of cool. A bunch of things happen at once. I don't know. I'm not sure how you would pull that off, right? Like, because it'd be kind of neat if left to right was the timeline, and then you had like, you could see what you're spending time on, because flame graphs are just brilliant ways to, visualize that kind of data. The problem is, I think, right, if you have 10 things happening at once, it's really hard to show that well in a flame graph. I don't know.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, I think slightly related. I think internally we also discussed changing the trace view to make it stack to the left. So it wouldn't be stretched out, but it would be easier to compare duration because like all the spans would start on the left column. Feels kind of similar. But I'm not sure if the Grafana team has anything planned around this.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense.
Cool. Yeah. Any other questions?
I think there was one
David?
question in the chat
Oh,
before Richie,
oh.
sending that he had to drop regarding serverless. Yep.
Good question. Will serverless search work with Parquet and 1.5? The answer is yes, although we've just really struggled with serverless. It's kind of a black box. It's really hard to see what's happening in there. And it just adds a lot of latency and confusion generally. And in fact, our best timings on Parquet have been when we have removed serverless and we've just relied on our queries only. So I think there'll be more guidance as 2.0 comes out. It does work with serverless, and we'll keep that option. What I think where we left it off last was our queries were doing most of the load, but for the absolute biggest queries, we were letting it spill over into serverless. And that was kind of a good balance. So if you queried huge time ranges that required, additional resources, we'd spill over into serverless, but we liked to keep most queries inside of the queriers. And I think we found that was a better balance. Now, we actually had Parquet in ops, and then we disabled it for a while to fix some memory issues, and we've recently re-enabled it. So we're kind of going back through a learning process to do some of this reconfiguration and setup of Parquet ourselves. So I don't know for sure, but it should continue to work, basically. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't.
Yeah, another thing to mention on this is that we actually did move from Google Cloud Functions to Cloud Run because of the 116 limitation. And so I guess depending on which cloud provider you're on, that may be relevant. Yeah.
Yeah. Cloud Run, we found it. We like Cloud Run better even. I should have started there, but whatever. The ability to choose the Go version, there's a lot more tunables in terms of how it scales and resources and all this. So we've had a lot more success on Cloud Run than Cloud Functions. But it's still just sometimes you execute a query that should take 100 milliseconds and it's 10 seconds. And it happens a lot. Like with GCS, whatever, you're hitting the 5/9 percentile. And so you get a couple seconds sometime on the query that should be 50 milliseconds. And that's fine. Tempo's built to deal with that. But it's a ton. It's a huge percentage of the queries to the serverless infrastructure seem to just take a long time. And we really have not been able to pin it down. And the other thing is, I don't really want to spend a ton of my time debugging cloud-specific issues and getting some really perfectly tunable Google Cloud thing. and then having little experience on AWS or another cloud, Azure or whatever. So we're going to probably re-coordinate around the queries only as much as possible, and maybe look at the serverless functions for longer queries, things maybe we consider more like a batch query, and we might have to make that distinction in Tempo depending on the amount of data that's being queried. Most of the interest in serverless is the big multi-day queries. Yeah, okay. We don't do it often, and it scales more quickly on demand, so we don't have the query sitting around. Yeah, I agree. It does feel wasteful, like to have a bunch of queries doing nothing. Now in our cloud offering, that's what we're going to do because we want to hit our SLOs. That's important, and it's worth it. But in terms of tuning something internal and making decisions about how many queries do I have versus how much I'm going to rely on serverless, I don't know. That's going to be a tough call. We deal with that now. And I think when 2.0 comes out, we'll have more guidance because we're going to have a lot more experience that time too, getting these configurable, the tunable setup. And when we release serverless, we kind of had a page that documents our settings and why we chose them. We'll do a similar thing when we do 2.0 Parquet serverless. When are we what are we going to see in 2.0 as their roadmap? 2.0, we're really hoping to see it at Observability Con, or at least within spitting distance, so we can say, hey, it's coming out soon, and announce it kind of at Observability Con. The big features would be Parquet GA, so like the Parquet backend being the default backend for Tempo and BGA, as well as what we're calling like phase 1 of TraceQL, which is Marty's working on now, and is going to be like the basic conditions. Marty, if you want to address that at all, feel free to jump in and the kinds of things we're looking for this 2.0.
Yeah, sure. Kunrad and I are working on TraceQL now. It's too big of a language to implement in one get-go, and we don't want to do that anyways. We want to get parts of it out there and see what works and what doesn't. So we've kind of internally just evaluated like what we consider the core of the language, and then that's what we're focusing on and what we hope to have ready. So it'd just be like basic span set selection, logic, things you can't do in the current search, like there will be included. So I think there's still a lot of interesting stuff there, but it won't be the full language. Yeah, that's what we're shooting for.
Cool. Maybe we should, as part of the next community call, kind of highlight some of that. I think we have a doc somewhere, so we can just take the details out of there and talk about what we want to be in each phase. And once we get rolling with it, when it get some momentum behind it, I think Marty's going to do a lot of like groundwork for a bit here to set up the structures necessary to really blast it out. And then it'll be done in a couple weeks. Right, Marty?
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, actually, with all the other stuff going on, it really is only a couple of weeks working time.
Cool. Whale? Any other questions? Doesn't have to be Tempo related. Can be turkey themed. You may be surprised how much I know about turkeys.
Yeah. Hey, Gabriel, actually, I was wondering, what was your block list length? I'd like to think about that problem some more.
It's a bit higher than what we before we started tweaking. It was like 120,000 or something like that. Yeah. We had to do a lot of changes to compactors and stuff. On the busiest clusters, around like 60,000 right now. The less busy clusters are around like 30,000, 40,000. So
cool.
Yeah, are those compactor changes? Do you mean like scaling and tuning, or do you mean like do you have any customizations?
What we see is no. There's no code customization. It's just like config changes. What we saw is that we would do only like level 1 pretty much compaction with like the heavy volume, like with our previous settings when we start getting a lot more. We would do mostly level 1 compaction and a little bit level 2. So we added a lot more compactors. I think we're running like 150 replicas on on the busy cluster, and we just like regularly cycle through, like use Tempo CLI, see what's like what the trending blocks, like trace per block is, and like just kind of increase that up. But the like time to actually see a real decrease, it takes a few days after. Like it's not, we can be like very reactive on that. It's like if the block list is increased, we're gonna have to live with a increased block list for, you know, sometimes up to like our retention time, which is just 7 days. So that's fine. I think we have to mitigate the query. It's like when this happens, we have to mitigate on the query times in some way for users to still be able to query the traces they need. So
yeah, compactors, I will say they're not very dense. Like each pod really only does one compaction at a time, and we've kind of like never changed that. I'm not sure, like, but 150 sounds about right for that scale that you were mentioning.
Actually, I think what you were discussing earlier about like having big ingesters versus small ingesters kind of gives me an idea a little bit more. I was just thinking, because we had to do, this is like insights on what's happening in my team. We had to do just infrastructure changes to kind of like keep traffic in certain zones, basically, just to cut on cost. So we're moving off of we're moving for moving data. We're moving off of PubSub and onto PubSub Lite right now, internally for moving our trace data from the collectors to our downstream systems, which are Tempo and like our other storage. And so we already have a plan to like, PubSub Lite allows us to partition traces in a certain way, so we can have all the spans for a trace to going to a certain place. I think maybe we could leverage that in some extent if we're already routing the data that's close together to the same ingesters or the same distributors. And now like between the distributors and the ingesters, I don't know how it actually, if it stays bunched up or not, but I don't know. Maybe this is like what I've been thinking about for part of the meeting also. Because like you said, if the traces stay together, then it won't need to be compacted again later, right? And then we would save on compaction, maybe.
Yeah, that's kind of what we're seeing while we're dealing with Parquet. Just upping the size of the blocks cut by the ingesters is a huge like relief to the compactors. You're just putting so much less pressure on them. So you are kind of playing a game of like, how long do I want to keep data in the ingesters? But if you can afford more there and cut fewer blocks, it does significantly reduce, right, the work your compactors have to do.
Yeah, I think it's the balancing game is that like the average usage is low, but when we get big spikes of traffic, resource usage goes way up. So we can't like put too much pressure on the ingesters, because then what we see is we'll see some ooming, and then it quickly degrades the amount of traces that Tempo can receive. Like if we have 2 ingesters that are down, we drop a lot of traces. And so we don't want to put too much pressure on the ingesters, just because we want to make sure we drop the least traces possible when there's spikes in traffic. And it still kind of happens, even though like our daily average is kind of high. So
cool.
Yeah, is that one big tenant or multi-tenants?
It's one big tenant, but we have multiple clusters.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a thing that just queries all the query front ends and assembles the traces.
Yeah.
Cool. What do I feed my hat? I feed my hat smaller hats. Alton says, I want to thank the Tempo team and community. I tried many open source things to record all my spans, and only Tempo handled it. Thanks, Alton. appreciate that. We've worked hard on this thing. And it's awesome to hear people hitting, honestly, multiple times our scale and having that kind of success with Tempo. So, yeah, keep talking to us and letting us know what you need. And we're going to keep making this thing, hoping for a really cool Parquet launch soon, next couple months. And I would encourage everyone to kind of experiment with it, maybe like in a dev cluster or like a staging cluster, and give us some feedback, and let's improve this and make this kind of the next step for Tempo. Cool. Anything else? Nothing? Marty?
Yeah, I'll do one more question. I think I saw in GrafanaCon that I just want to confirm for the next version, so the 2.0, if we're going to have a way to do aggregations within Tempo. So then if I say I would like to check all trace, like aggregate, I don't know, given that this service has 500, give me these tags. What are the common values? So then I can know what is causing the issue.
Sure.
I remember hearing something like this. Is it coming to 2.0, or this is like a way more far?
It won't be in 2.0 unless something wild happens in the next couple of months. Likely, though, that's coming soon. I think that's phase 2 of TraceQL. So 2.0 will have phase 1, which will be the basic selections, aggregation, like counting spans, or doing like averages of durations over sets of spans will be in 2 point something. something after 2.0.
Yeah, I wonder how much you could accomplish that with a metrics generator, because it can calculate span metrics, and the dimensions of your tags can turn into metrics dimensions. And so if you just want call rates over time, I mean, that might be one way to get that.
Yeah, so at least what the issues that sometimes I see is when there is high cardinality. So I cannot use the normal metrics generator. So let's say that we have an ID of some entity, and maybe one ID has some issue, like exactly when every time a request hits this ID is that we see the error. Now we're doing it with the logs, so we put the spans to the logs, but I would love to do it also within Tempo, just to have all the experience in one place.
Yeah, time series queries for TraceQL, we'll put those towards the end of the implementation, but yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, I think it's been a really good call. Thanks everyone for showing up. And apparently we need to do AMAs more often, because this was pretty successful, I think. Next time I expect better questions, though. So, see what you got. All right, everyone take care. And we will see you hopefully in a month at the next community call. And if not, I'll see you before then. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.